Do you have a question for the goddess of purity, or the queen of light, or the goddess of light? Stephen Berkeley.
This is for the goddess of light. What is the future of Europe and Russia? What is the Golden Age future for it? How can they work together? How can we stop war there? And how can they become a great beacon of light for the world?
Every nation and also every continent has a divine plan, and the many nations that comprise Europe are quite an amalgamation of different cultures, languages, of course, different peoples. And the historical context, if you look back, goes thousands and thousands of years. And it truly is kind of a melting pot. And it's actually amazing that they call it Europe or Europa because of so many different influences and peoples. Now, as we know, more recently, there have been an influx of a lot of people from Africa and the Middle East, and this has put a strain on the nations that already kind of had their heritage and their culture, very specific and very noted over a long period of time. And not all these cultures are assimilating into those cultures very much. In fact, they're maintaining their, whether it's Islamic peoples or other peoples, they're not assimilating. So the vision of the future is to have immigration or emigration with understanding and with honor, rather than people coming only for the purpose of seeking a better life financially and then not integrating and not respecting the culture of those nations that are already there. And so some of these nations will put up barriers to prevent there from being such a marked emigration into their nations that it basically is kind of like destroying what they had, or what they feel they've had for hundreds of years, even centuries. The issue at hand is that it's very difficult to unite or have what's called a united, almost like a united kingdom, if you want to call it that, United Nations of peoples in Europe, because of the disparity between some religions and some cultures, and that they do not recognize each other as good or authentic, or their brothers and sisters from one eternal Father, Mother, God. This is the big question, is it's both assimilation, yet also it has to do with whether people can get along as a continent. You have the European Union, you have some nations that were part of it that are not, like Great Britain is not part of it now. And so it hasn't worked to the extent that it allows there to be freedom in the highest aspect, like in the United States with our Constitution. There are still monarchies within Europe. And even if they're more figurehead, it does kind of put some of those nations into a different type of field that can be problematic when you look at the totality of what could be kind of a United States of Europe and what Saint Germain was attempting to do. So the influence of fanatical Islam and a violent Islam is problematic for the way of the ascended hosts and the masters to see in the end result the harmony and the balance between all the nations of Europe. And the stress that's placed on these nations is so great right now that I don't, on behalf of Saint Germain, he's kind of answering this more than the Goddess of Light, if that's okay, because he's more invested in this than the Goddess of Light is in terms of Europe. The strain that's there is so intense that it could take a couple generations to really iron things out and to bring about a harmony and a balance again. So the false hierarchy of Islam has to be cleared and cleaned. The false hierarchy of anti-religion and what you've seen in the former Soviet Union, anti-God, or the anti-God forces. And the fallen ones who use any religion to bind people rather than to liberate and free people. So the portents are there for greater conflict for the future, yet there are light bearers who are working for deeper understandings. And if Russia can be assimilated more into Europe, in the sense that it is not just Asia or Eurasia, that it is of the same, foundation as the rest of Europe, and the whole need for NATO itself, because Russia could be assimilated into Europe, that could be the answer to this dilemma. But because of the conflicts going on now and the jealousies and the harmony, between peoples and different nations, it's a total mixed bag, and I don't really see it harmonized to the extent that it could be without the Prince of Peace, without Jesus intervening and interceding in a tremendous way. There could be a lot more destruction before peace can reign in Europe, especially Eastern Europe. Now, what is the goal of the Ascended Masters? You can reread El Morya's encyclical on world goodwill to get a sense of how nations and their peoples can get along with each other. And there can be trade, there can be educational collaboration, and so many different ways where the goods and the services and the abundance of different nations are shared and the resources are shared. Where there is conflict, it is some are trying to use the resources only for themselves without understanding that these resources of the earth are meant for all peoples, and they can be distributed appropriately, not in a communistic way that's perverted or a socialistic way. They can be distributed in an appropriate way where it's a win-win situation. So the conflict can be mitigated, mollified, and ultimately resolved when the resources aren't hoarded, they're not siphoned off by billionaires who then use them for their own personal interests, where the culture shifts toward a true kind of republican government everywhere, democracy within a republic, if you'd like to call it that, where the oligarchs who steal the money and who get rich can be more compassionate for all peoples, their own nations, but all peoples, and world goodwill reigns. So that's the key. Saint Germain says, El Morya's vision, his vision, there has to be world goodwill. Goodwill for all peoples. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men, women, and children of all nations. Until you have righteous leaders who are Christ-centered, who will not attempt to just use the resources of one area only for their own, greed, then it's hard to see the end result of a peaceable kingdom, so to speak. So in terms of Europe's place in the world, it's very important. It's probably the third most important grouping of nations. I mean, you have the United States of America, you have China, and you have Africa and Europe. However, there's a lot more wealth currently in Europe than, let's say, in Africa, though the resources in Africa are huge. And if they were utilized appropriately and used throughout the world, that would be a boon for all peoples. Yet what happens is these richer nations who are more developed will go in and try to extract the resources, and this does not help the people of those nations. And there's a disparity that is the very reason why some people desire a socialistic or communistic system, because they see that perverted capitalism as taking these resources and not having the appropriate equanimity of their distribution among all peoples. So it will take world goodwill. It will take righteous leaders and really a synarchy of what the Master Omar Mikhail Ivanov and Peter Dunov have talked about, which is a spiritual hierarchy of the most righteous leading all the nations. It's not a one world government by the fallen ones. It is a synarchy of light, where those of the highest attainment rise to lead. And they will lead righteously, and they will work collaboratively with all peoples when all peoples are respectful and follow the golden rule. So it's a vision for the future for the whole world, not just for Europe, that Saint Germain el-Moria and the Masters have. And a lot has to be done. Changes are being made where some of the entrenched, age-old dialectics through the powers that be and the international banks and those super rich families that have, in effect, kind of financially control the world, where those influences are kind of decapitated and the money is brought out into the open for the whole world to know about and for people to be able to utilize that abundance everywhere and for free energy. So there are three linchpins in this that I see from Saint Germain. One is free energy. One is all governments of, by, and for the people. So it's not an elite governing or controlling and manipulating, but all governments of, by, and for the people. And then universal education and trade and collaboration between nations, where it's always win-win-win rather than win-lose. It has to be win-win-win. So the education is important so that peoples are wise. You know, when you have a lack of education, and what the perverted Islam has done with trying to suppress women being educated and girls being educated, that is ancient and that is wrong. Women deserve the best education in all nations. And so the other linchpin is the age of the Divine Mother coming into manifestation through the righteous women who rise to positions of leadership, who will lead humanity into the Golden-Crystal Age of Aquarius. Because what is Aquarius? It's a lady with the alabaster jar. It's a woman leading through righteousness, through purity, and through her wisdom and her understanding of the needs of all peoples, especially children and families. So those cultures where abortion has been holding sway die out. Those cultures where families are honored and there is the birth of children and larger families, those cultures multiply and expand and they grow. And they, so you look at the cultures that are expanding more and more, they have more children. And the cultures that have suppressed having children, they're losing. They are losing. So we have to understand the dynamics of the family in this too, and how important the family is, and true families where both parents are there rather than single parent families. So I don't know if that answers your question fully. What was the other part of it? Did it have to do with government or not? I can't recall.
Just being a beacon to show the world that they are the most civilized area in the world, going back 3,000 years.
Well, there's...
In a certain sense.
Okay. You have to go back further than that to Golden-Crystal Ages. And there are a lot more higher civilizations
Right.
with Atlantis, Lemuria, Golden Ages in South America, and even in Africa, the age where, 30,000 years ago, the Golden Age in Africa. So you can't just go back 3,000 years, and because that's the historical context that's false, that current history teaches. It's a false view of history. We have to go back further. And so the revelations and under the paw of the Sphinx and in Romania, this will give the true history of the world. And when people realize that there have been these great cultures of the past and that they had a much more advanced civilization than we have now, they will see that they were based on principles and values that were very high. And so we have to get beyond just the sense of what we teach about history, which is not the complete story. So I don't see that as an element that's really as crucial. When the full disclosure is made of the full history of the earth, people will see what has really happened, the manipulation, and they will not allow there to be those who will continue to manipulate civilization. And so when the disclosure happens, as it's happening, people are awakening, and the dark ones will wither away, and they will not hold sway any longer. It's part of what has to happen. And unfortunately, some conflicts have to happen in order for this to happen, for a better way forward. And these conflicts are in process now, and it's not fun, but the stranglehold that the dark ones have on our civilization and our culture are so entrenched that it's very difficult to just have that collapse. But it is collapsing, and it is collapsing. Okay, anything else? Well, first I'd like to see if there's any questions online, Boyd.
There's a comment here. I don't know if it's a question. It's from Albana. She says, it was a beautiful surprise to realize the connection between the snowflake and the Queen of Light. Reflecting on how much I loved fables and fairy tales growing up, it made me wonder how many of our beloved classic fables are actually based on the archetypes and journeys of the masters. Having said that, would the masters consider giving the heartstreams that discuss these themes in more depth for children and families? I believe it would be a powerful, engaging addition to the youth team collection of teachings going forward to bridge the distance between the masters and us, as well as a new opportunity to retell these themes with a new purpose and understanding for the new generation. Thank you.
It's a great request, and I think the masters have heard it. It's like more Aesop fables or more, not Brothers Grimm, but the other ones, the good ones. So we'll see what happens. Duly noted, Albana. I think you hit on something very important. We require new stories and beautiful fables. So we'll see what happens. I'm working on an alchemy right now that I can't talk about. When it's released, people will really enjoy what's coming day after day after day. You'll enjoy it in many ways. So it's similar to what you're requesting. It's not exactly what you're requesting, but I think we will have some neat surprises. Okay, Christopher had a question.
Could the Queen of Light give us some insight into the understanding of the light of consciousness, the language of consciousness that will involve and evolve our conscience in a great enlightenment for the earth?
Well, light is always the alchemical key. Light is the alchemical key for everything that occurs, because the intelligence of light is what creates civilization. The God intelligence within light. Without light, you have no civilization. You have no culture. So when we understand the nuances of light, both spiritual light and physical light, as the Master Omram Mikhail Ivanov has talked about it, then you understand all these nuances of how cultures are established, light brick by light brick, or light essence by light essence. And you can see the divine glyphs within light. If you could actually study light and its infinite capacity to transform beingness and create life. So light creates life. Let there be light. Then you would understand how to improve life, because light is necessary to improve life on earth and throughout all spheres. So one of the most important classes in every school and every university or college should be on light, and both physical light and spiritual light. Yet, do we study light? Do we study, you study a little bit in art, with shadow and light. You study light, yes, some of the sciences, study light, whether it's the eye, knowing how light works with the eye and the brain is important. How important light is for health, vitality, wellness is important. And also, laser technology, it's being used more and more. And of course, that has everything to do with light. Light amplified, stimulated, whatever, energy, rays, whatever. So in the Golden Age dawning, light will be understood more and more in all of its aspects. Its import, its nuances, so that we can use that light both to glorify God, to bring new life into existence, and to bring new energies into every aspect of our culture and civilization. Because, let's say, for instance, permaculture. When you understand light and its impact on plants, you can plan accordingly. You can grow things appropriately. If you take light out of the equation, you're not going to get the rich plant that has all the light essences within it to feed and nourish us, right? So, unfortunately, this dimming of the skies that Bill Gates and others have promulgated, and it's happening with chemtrails, the very thing that they're dimming is the light of the sun coming into proximity with us and into our vision, into our cells of our body, into the plants and the earth itself. It's totally anti-light. Besides abortion, it is the worst thing happening on the planet. In a sense, almost worse than war, because it impacts life everywhere on earth, the dimming of the sun. So we have to have a measure to counter that ASAP. And whether we have a canned letter that people can send to their legislators or the president or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whatever, we have to get on this, because it's getting worse and worse, and the nutrients are not being fixed within the plants that they should be, because of the compromise of the air, the atmosphere, because the light is not getting through properly. So light is so important to everything that we should have a Meru class on light and have 3 teachers, who collaborate and teach everything about light that we can know, and whether it's color, whether it's, for growth of plants and animals and life forms, and the spiritual aspects of light. This should be one of the most important classes. And by the way, the Essenes studied light. They knew light inside and out. And so that teaching has to come back. And whether it's photonic, whether it's rays, whether it's waves, let us all understand this, because it will help us in our spiritual work too. Because what do we do in our work, in our services? We emanate light. How do we do that? Well, we first have to be the light. How do we become the light? Well, we draw it in, we assimilate it, we eat fire, and we drink light, and then we can emanate it. So everything we do as light bearers, light workers, light sharers has to do with the light of God. So light is both the alchemical key, and it's the solution to everything, because love is within light too, and in divine intelligence. So study light. Kathleen, is the head of Mayer University now, or the kind of the director. Let us talk about, whether it's next year or later this year, having a class on light, and who can teach it, and who can, do the research and bring forth what the masters have said about light. It's so important. It's so important.